Welcome to the Fireside Chat on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network by Run Try Bike. We have Anthony Targan joining us today. Anthony is a marathoner that has qualified for the Boston Marathon in 2013, amongst other years. But 2013 stands out because, as you will recall, that is the year of the Boston Marathon bombing. In 2020, he was diagnosed with bladder cancer. In 2023, he ran a marathon that was 9 minutes faster than his Boston qualifying time and was ready to race the Boston Marathon this year, this month. A month after qualifying, he learned that his cancer had turned into, quote, high grade, end quote, which means potentially fatal. So you can imagine what's going through Tony's mind when he gets this diagnosis. Tony is 63 years old, and he's undergoing monthly cancer treatments while training for Boston, all the while raising money for cancer research. A number of different things we're going to talk to him about today. But before we bring him onto the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform. There are 9 shows to choose from with various stories and hosts. I'm sure you'll find one or all of them to your liking. So without any more delay and me yammering on, let's bring Anthony from the back room and talk to him about his latest and upcoming journey through the world of running. Hey, Anthony, how are you today?
Jason, great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. So we have an icebreaker question, Anthony, that we ask every guest that joins us. And having learned that you are a New Yorker now living in Michigan, Detroit, my question for you is going to take on a different meaning because I'm interested in your answer. And our question is pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
It's not my absolute favorite, but I will definitely eat it if it's here.
Very political-like answer there, Tony. For those who know me, the answer is always absolutely not. No matter what you try to serve to me, I will just order a different pie, period, end of story. By the way, so New York style pizza, Detroit style pizza, 2 different styles of pizza. Which do you prefer?
Gotta say, I gotta go with Detroit. It's got all of the depth of Chicago, but it's got much more richness of flavor. New York is fine if you want to fold it over and bite it off in one bite, but I really prefer Detroit pizza.
You know, I was introduced to Detroit pizza about 7 or 8 years ago and absolutely loved it. It is, to your point, a better Chicago slice.
Yeah.
You can't fold it like New York, but it's definitely way better. So I'm glad we're on the same page there then. Not that I prefer it, I do like it.
I redeemed myself after the pineapple.
Exactly. So Anthony, pardon me. I said I wasn't going to call you Tony in the green room in there. I just did. I want to go back to 2013 when you first qualified for Boston, is what you sent us in your email. And what was that feeling like? Because you sent me a list of marathons that you had run over the years. And I presume you hadn't qualified for Boston. And then in 2013 is when it happened the first time. Is that correct?
Well, actually not. I had qualified the first time when I ran Cleveland in 2006, and I ran the 2017, losing my dates here. I ran the 2007 marathon, was my first Boston. So the 2013 was actually my 5th.
Okay.
But everyone is very special, as you can imagine. And the fact that I ran in 2007, I had to get back there. That was my motivation. Every marathon I've run since then was just to try to get back to Boston.
So when you first started running, was Boston always the goal, or did you start out with, like most people, which is I just want to finish first and then figure it out after?
My first marathon was Detroit in 2002, and I had just turned 40, and my best friend from law school said, we need to do something epic this year. Let's run a marathon. I said, great. I'm not a runner. So I went from 0 to finishing a marathon in about 5 months and thought I was done. But then said, if I could just run a half hour faster, I could actually qualify for Boston.
Just a half hour faster.
Yeah. That was my naivete as a 40-year-old runner who was finding this talent, such as it was for the first time. But yeah, it took me 4 years of trying. And then, as I said, in Cleveland in 2006, I finally qualified for the 2007 Boston. But yeah, my first goal was just to finish. But then once I got a taste of And I have a lot of running friends, and that's all they would ever talk about was the glory of Boston. So it was really a holy grail for me from very, very early on.
So you mentioned every one of the times you've run Boston was special, and I want to get an idea or a feel from you as you went through the process of qualifying repeatedly at this point.
Mhm.
Did it get harder mentally to qualify? Meaning, the easy off ramp is I've already been there. I don't need to work as hard today, and if I don't make it, no big deal. Or was it such a goal that you really did push yourself year in and year out to get back?
Well, I'll answer it this way. When I said I started running when I was 40, I kind of hit my peak when I was 50. I was actually felt pretty confident. Like I would say my best race ever was when I qualified for Boston at Boston. So to run a Boston qualifying time at Boston was pretty special. But yeah, I think I knew what I needed to do to get there. But the older I got, the harder it got. And I guess after I had done it the fifth time, I kind of felt like, well, this may not happen again. I'm getting slower.
Was there, so take me through that process. This may not happen again. I'm getting slower. Was there this idea of I'm going to pivot away from marathons? Or
Yeah.
was it I'm just going to keep running because I have friends and a community that, I enjoy participating in marathon running with?
Well, I would say in 2017, when I ran the New York City Marathon, which itself was very special, it was by far my most difficult race. I ran 10 minutes slower than the first marathon that I had run 15 years prior. And, to run a 4:15 marathon when I needed 3:40, I just said, this is diminishing returns. This is not going to happen again. So I thought I was done in 2017 after New York. And then, I guess after the pandemic, and I mentioned my friend Jack, who ran the first marathon at the same time with me. He's run 150 since then. And every time he runs one, he's like, when are you going to qualify for Boston? So to shut him up, I finally decided, all right, I'm going to try again in 2023. And that's when I ran my most, but it was 6 years since my previous slowest marathon. So I had no idea whether I'd be able to do it again.
We'll talk about qualifying in 2023 in a minute. I want to go back to 2013, qualifying and lining up at the start line
Yeah.
for the Boston Marathon. Clearly, you had no idea what was going to transpire in the next few hours, but give me a sense of what it's like at the starting line of this event in 2013 specifically. Nerves, anxiety, stress, elation. What's happening?
Well, for me personally, it had been after running Boston like 4 years in a row. It had taken me 3 years to re-qualify to get there in 2013. So I was just considering this my victory lap. I told my friend Jack, again, who I was running with, hey, we're just going to run for fun. I don't care about our time. We stopped to kiss the girls at Wellesley and high five the guys at Boston College, and I've described it as sort of like the best day and the worst day of my life because I was having so much fun with so little pressure running the race that I loved in the community that is just so supportive. And then, of course, all of that changed. So,
Where were you when the bombing took place?
we had finished the race about 20 minutes prior. We were walking back parallel to the finish line, Boylston Street, and I heard the first concussion, and with the way the buildings were echoing, you couldn't really tell where it was. And Jack said to me, "What was that?" And I said, "It sounded like a bomb." 10 seconds later, we heard unmistakably the second bomb, and we were actually about a block away from the second explosion because within seconds, terrified people were running right at us on the perpendicular street to where we were. So it became very, very real very quickly.
Very real, very quickly is something I would assume was for a lot of people, but I wanted you to contrast that to just a handful of hours earlier, like you just talked about being at the starting line.
Yes.
Was it frightening? Was it fight or flight? Is I guess where I'm going, right? So what's the sense that takes over for you?
Well, I was very concerned. I mean, we were not in the immediate harm's way. But at that point, having heard 2 explosions, you don't know if there are more coming. And my first inclination was to get back to the hotel as quick as we could. But I was very concerned because I had a number of friends that were that I knew were waiting at the finish line for some other runners to come in, and they were really in ground zero. So concerned for my friends. I will say that, you know, I was kind of limping along after having run the race. And then when that adrenaline kicked in, you know, we weren't running, but we were moving very quickly to get away from the explosions back to the hotel.
Obviously, it's mayhem. People are coming, going in all different directions. Could you, you know, the way they talk about athletes in a fast-paced game is that it slows down for them and they're able to make a play. Did everything stay fast-paced for you, or did the world sort of slow down and you were able to figure out, I've got to head in this direction to get to my hotel?
Yeah, I think you know, seeing the people, the terror on the people coming towards us, I knew something terrible had happened, but we still really didn't have any clear picture of the extent of the damage or the carnage. And it was just, I guess, in my mind, it was just, all right, where do we need to go to be safe? And I thought, let's go back to the hotel. I was surprised that once we got there, nobody knew anything had happened. So we actually went up to our rooms and started watching on TV for the very early coverage of what was happening. But it was just sort of instant kicks in, and I guess the world did slow down a little bit.
In the green room, you mentioned to me that you became an on-the-scene correspondent. How did that transpire? What happened that you were all of a sudden, you know, giving news reports?
Yeah. Well, my background, having been a writer for Michigan Runner magazine, I was actually sort of there on assignment to cover the race. And doing a lot of local theater in Michigan, I had a couple of friends in the news media who happened to know that I was in Boston. The strange thing that happened was, because of the bombing, everybody was trying to use their cell phones at once, and the entire mobile network went down. But because I was in a hotel room with a landline, my media friends were able to contact me directly, and they said, "Hey, you're our man on the street." I'm like, "Hey, I don't really know anything more than what I'm seeing," but they said, "You're there. Tell us what you saw, what you heard, what you know." And I just started doing interviews for TV and radio that they ended up using as voiceovers to their footage.
So did you go back out on the street to interview runners, or did you stay in the hotel and as other runners were coming in, you would talk to them?
No, I was just talking to the media folks. I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was, well, I should go back and help, but that would not have happened because the police were, you know, I'm not a trained medical person. There's nothing I could do other than look for my friends, so I just felt like I could do the most good by helping people understand what was going on.
It's been 12 years and
Can
almost.
I just add
Yes,
one footnote
please
to
do.
that? The funny thing, although maybe not funny at the time to my wife, she happened to be on a long conference call with someone in Boston who at the end of the call said, "I hope your husband's okay." And she said, "Why wouldn't he be okay?" She had no idea that there had been a bombing, and I couldn't get through to her on the cell phone, but she knew I was okay when she actually heard me on the radio on the way home from work. So
That is amazing. And thankfully you had media contacts that you could get on the radio, because otherwise it would have been very difficult for her to get in touch with you.
Yeah.
12 years later, when you think about the times that you were there beforehand, start the race, finish the race, medals, jackets, just enjoyment, how does 2013, you know, compare? And I think that's a terrible word to use. I just can't think of another word. Like, how does it fit into Anthony's story about running the Boston Marathon?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I'm proud that I was a part of that history, even though it was a terrible day. But in other ways, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it ruins it, but, you know, I don't want that to be my last memory of Boston. And whenever people know that you ran Boston, that's all they ask about or think about. Even for, you know, a couple of years afterwards, I would get calls from the media because they knew I had been there. And I'm like, Boston is about, the Boston Marathon and Patriots Day is about so much more than that. It's about, well, my shirt says Boston Strong. It's about the community coming together and rallying and coming back the next year and not being afraid. And I had so many friends that went to run the race just because they didn't get to finish the previous time. So to me, it's sort of bittersweet. I love the memory of Boston, but I don't want it to be just about the bombing.
Was the idea to then qualify for this event over basically coming up on 10 years from the bombing? Was that the impetus for wanting to qualify, was to create a new last memory for Boston?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Plus to shut my friend up because he kept bugging me. You're going to qualify. I said, all right, I'll try one more time.
So take me through that process of, I mean, 10 years later, basically the first time you qualified was 2006, 2007. So you're looking at 16, 17 years. There's a lot of time in there, right? You've learned a lot about yourself. You've learned, nutrition, hydration strategies, like everything has changed. What was your approach to qualifying for Boston this time around in compared to the 5 previous times?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, during the pandemic, I gained and then lost a lot of weight. But I really felt like if I was going to make it a good faith effort to try to get there, that I really needed to train. Because in the past, when I was sort of always in marathon shape, it was just, I'll just throw a few 20 milers in and I'll be ready. But this time was different. It's like, okay, I really need to build up. I started doing more. I bought a Peloton during the pandemic, but I really think the cross training helped me a lot. And I've got such a strong core running group here, people that I've known for 20 years that, if you need somebody to run with you, there's always somebody doing the miles that you need to do. So I got reconnected to my group and started doing, building up and training as if it was more like my first race than just another marathon.
Was there a moment during the training when you thought to yourself, I got this? Not that it's going to be easy, not that I'm absolutely going to qualify, but I've got a chance.
Yes, there's a race in this was actually in August, but a race called the Crim up in Flint, Michigan, 10-mile race. And people come from all over the world to run it because there's prize money. And I have run it maybe 10 times. And when I was really in shape, I even ran a sub 7-minute 10 miler up there. But when I ran the Crim in 2023, it wasn't my fastest one, but I felt like there's a lot of hills in this race and this is going to be what I need to get ready for Boston. So that gave me confidence.
What race did you run that you qualified for Boston, and by 9 minutes? So you didn't just get in. You really crushed that event. What event was it?
That was the Stony Creek Marathon. But let me back up to the Toledo Marathon, which was earlier, actually April of 2023, because that was the first marathon I had run in 6 years. And I ran that one in 3:46, which was 4 minutes faster than my qualifying time. And I thought, I'm in, no problem. I can take the summer off. And I found out in the middle of September that there was a record number of applicants. So only 2/3 of the people that qualified actually got in. So I went from thinking I was in to knowing I was out and then having to make a quick decision. Can I find a marathon between now, can I run another qualifying time? So I had to regroup and found this local race a half mile from my house in a metro park, but it was a certified course. And I remember feeling like I was on pace, but knowing that I had gotten burned the last time, I'm like, I'm just going to give it everything I have, even though I'm hurting the last 3 miles. So I killed it. I qualified by 9 minutes, and it's a good thing I did because the cutoff this time was 7 minutes. So I was thrilled to be able to get in finally under the wire.
So you get the email. Congratulations, you're going to Boston. In the moment, because we have another part of this story that we need to add, but in the moment when you get that email, does 2013 start to take its step backwards in your memory banks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was 10 years prior, and yeah, I mean, again, it wasn't just to erase that, but it was the validation that I could still do this, and for being in my 60s and be able to run, most of my marathon times have been in the 3:40s, even when I was in my 40s, and just to be able to do that one more time was very gratifying.
So we're gonna fast forward 30 days
Yeah.
from finding out that you qualified, and you get other news.
Yeah.
News that is not so joyous. You find out that you have bladder cancer approximately a month after finding out that you qualified
Yeah.
for the Boston Marathon. Walk me through the emotions that go from the high of that email from BAA to a conversation with your doctor and giving you the diagnosis that you have bladder cancer.
So just to back up, I was initially diagnosed 5 years ago. And I had a tumor that was surgically removed, but it was slow growing, low grade. They just check your bladder every few months, and if they don't see anything, you're fine. So I got, I guess, lulled into a false sense of security that, hey, this is behind me. I don't even have to think about this again. But then when I got the news that, no, this is different. You need to treat this aggressively. And I said, what if I don't? They said, it could kill you. It could spread. So yeah, that was a real gut punch. And when they started talking about treatment options and what if the treatment doesn't work? Well, then they talk about maybe they take your bladder out. And yeah, so it was very depressing at first, but I'm very good at sort of saying, okay, now that I've gotten the wind knocked out of me, where do we move forward? So in talking with my doctors, I decided to enroll in a clinical trial which combined two immunotherapy drugs, one administered intravenously and one directly into my bladder. And I've been doing that for the past year. And there were definitely ups and downs with the treatment, but for the most part, I tolerated it very well, other than some fatigue after the infusions. And then I was very blessed and thankful to report that when I had my first biopsy 6 months ago, I was cancer-free once again. But I continued with the treatment because it's part of the study and it has a preventative effect if they want you to continue to get the monthly treatments. And I tolerated those well until January, when all of a sudden my body decided that rather than fight the cancer, I had an autoimmune response to where the medicine started attacking my own joints and muscles. So again, a lot of highs and lows in this roller coaster.
Yeah, and pardon me, as anybody who has had a family member or a close relative or friend go through cancer treatments, it's not easy on the body. It's not easy on the mind. Like I'd mentioned to you in the green room, my dad passed away from cancer when I was 23 years old, and as I got close, and he passed away about a week before his 50th birthday. And so as I got close to my 50th birthday a year ago, 2 years ago almost, I was concerned. I was like, am I going to make it past the day that my father didn't make it past? And I didn't have cancer diagnosis. And so from a physical standpoint, a person who is running marathons, qualifying for Boston, and the highs of those things, and does the idea of like a bad run all of a sudden mean absolutely nothing to you because there's a bigger picture out here with getting this diagnosis and going through the treatments that you're going through?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely puts things in perspective. I mean, one thing I will say, and this goes back to sort of after I had qualified, I wanted this marathon to be different. I wanted it to be not just about me and my time and the number of marathons. So even though I had my own qualification, my own bib, I wanted to find a charity that would give meaning to me, and being part of something that's bigger than myself. So I signed up with the Dana-Farber Marathon Challenge. They're a huge Boston-based hospital that does a lot for cancer charity, and started fundraising. Raised like $5,000 in my first month, and then they've been very supportive of not only my fundraising, but I've kept them very closely involved in what's going on with me personally. So just to make a long story short, again, the highs and lows, it's been great to qualify again to know that I could do this. But a few weeks ago, in meeting with my doctors, they said, the inflammation that you're having from the treatments or your body's response to the treatments, it's not going to be realistic for you to run the marathon in April. So I'm okay with that. I've accepted that. Another part of that, that makes me feel like this is all, it's going to give me more motivation to get back someday. But for right now, I'm just focused on continuing to raise money. If I can plug the Dana-Farber Marathon Challenge, and it shows me that it's even more important, to raise that money, even if I can't be there to run the race myself. I am going to go to Boston to cheer my friend Jack on. We were going to run the race together, but yeah. So my marathon journey will have to be postponed once again.
I want to talk about raising money for the Dana-Farber Cancer Research Foundation, and the mindset that you as a marathoner who has overcome highs and lows takes to this new finish line, which is raising as much money as possible. How do they work together? How does the marathon mindset and the fundraising work together? Because a lot of people oftentimes will raise funds without a true connection to the charity because they want to get a bib to some event, or they're required to do it for some reason. How does it work for you?
Well, I've never been good about asking people for money, and I don't like doing things that just sort of draw attention to myself. But I really found as soon as I started to ask people, particularly if I said, if you donated a certain amount, I'll dedicate a mile of my race to you. Everybody has been affected by cancer, whether they've had it themselves or lost loved ones or know people. So it's just so universal. I felt like I was getting, so much more from people whose stories they were coming back to me about why they wanted me to run. And I felt like I was letting them down when I couldn't run the race, but they were like, no, you're raising this money for a great cause. And even if you can't finish the race, this is still very worthwhile. So it was very emotionally uplifting at a time when I was very down to hear all of this support from folks that, they truly understood the importance of this.
It is the bigger picture, right, in life, that there are things that are more important than crossing the finish line. You now have the opportunity to raise funds that may help or will help other people's lives. And I think that oftentimes that gets lost when we're doing a hill repeat or a track workout, because in that moment it's hard and that's where our focus is. But being able to circle around and come back to this idea that this is bigger than me, I think is something that I wish more people would talk about, right? It's not to say that people don't do it. I just wish they would talk about it more, that there are things bigger than, a particular medal in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, runners and athletes, we're all a little bit OCD or compulsive, and, we care about our miles, we care about our times, we're competing in races against each other. So I think there is a lot of it that's driven in a good competitive way, but it is very self-focused. So I think to sort of step outside yourself and I have found certainly in Michigan, the local running community be very supportive of each other. And I think especially as people age and get a little more perspective on life, it's more fun to cheer your friends on than to just worry about, whether you got your own medal or PR. So
that's why Jack will have his cheering crew when he runs Boston. You'll be there rooting for him.
Yep.
Out of curiosity, because you are an athlete, you are a competitor, you've been running for over a decade, trying to qualify for Boston, which you've done a number of times. Have you given yourself a fundraising goal?
Well, I think for the marathon challenge, my goal was 10,000, and I'm at 6,000 now. I really kind of slowed down. I raised most of it right away. I just felt like I couldn't, in good conscience, go to people and say, "Hey, sponsor me to run a race that I know that I'm not going to actually compete in." But even since I've told people that I'm not able to run, I've gotten more donations because people still believe in the cause.
Yeah, because again, it's bigger than the race, right?
Right.
And to your point earlier, we have all been impacted by cancer in some form or fashion. Your story is very powerful, Anthony, and it is a great reminder for me and I hope for our audience about running and life. And I'm wondering, as a regular columnist for Michigan Runner for about a decade,
Mm-hmm.
is there any story that you can recall today that you're still amazed by? Because I can guarantee you that your story will not become just a fleeting memory for me, because of the connection to cancer, because of the loss of my father, because you're a marathoner, like all these dots
Yeah.
are connected. Is there a story that you wrote at your time with Michigan Runner that immediately pops into your head when you think about it?
Well, I will answer that by saying it also is a story about me, but it was actually it's the very first article that I wrote for them, and I did it unsolicited because what I had experienced to me was so amazing. I just wanted to share the story. So when I ran Cleveland in 2006, which turned out to be the first year that I qualified, I was cruising. I was like 4 minutes ahead of my goal pace at like mile 19. And then by mile 23, the winds kicked in and I started slowing it down and I started to cramp. And I was starting to feel sorry for myself. And I knew that my window had shrunk to basically nothing. And I felt like, I've been trying for 4 years and now I'm going to fail again. Just at the moment that I was having a little pity party, this woman ran by me. She had a word on the back of her shirt that said "believe," and I looked down and she was running on a prosthetic leg. She was a below the knee amputee. And I said, "All right, that's it. Stop feeling sorry for yourself." And I kicked it in, and I couldn't catch her because she was running 8-minute pace, but I like stiff legged it as my legs were cramping up. I could see the finish line clock ticking down, and I crossed the finish line and qualified with 41 seconds to spare before the cramps took me down. Now, I said this wasn't about me. I had to find out who this woman was because she was so motivating for me. And I found out later that her name is Amy Palmiero Winters, and she had set a record at that race, which she went on to break in Chicago for the fastest marathon by an amputee. And she has gone on to do incredible things, endurance-wise, running marathons through the Sahara. But I struck up a friendship with her, and that was really sort of the first story that I wrote about how somebody else overcame disability or hardship and turned it into a positive, and that it inspired me so much that I was able to use that to qualify myself.
Yeah, you're going to bring tears to my eyes because the whole point of our Run Try Bike platform is to celebrate athletes overcoming obstacles and hurdles on their way to their own finish line. It's one of the things we don't do, or at least we try to avoid as much as possible, is the vanity metrics. How fast did you run? How far did you run? All of those things, because while they're an important part of the story, it's the obstacle that you had to overcome to get there. And so your story about qualifying for Boston in that time, in the first article you wrote for Michigan Runner, is about overcoming an obstacle. You were in the midst of shutting down.
Yeah.
And opportunistically enough for you, somebody came across your path, and it was one word, believe, that reframed your mindset.
Yeah.
I want to know how often, and you don't have to give me a specific number, but how often during training between then and now has that thought, that story, that idea of believe popped into your head? Is that a driving force for you when you're out there training and racing?
Maybe not that single moment, but I think to me it's sort of emblematic of it is so much mind over matter, particularly the longer the race is, the more it's about mental focus. And I'm not a great athlete. I am not a super fast runner, but I am very good at staying focused in the present moment. To me, running is a form of meditation or therapy. People talk about a runner's high. To me, it's more of an elevated sense of well-being when everything is just in rhythm. So to me, believe means sort of believe in yourself, believe in being in that moment. Don't worry about what's happened or what's going to happen, but just run the mile you're in.
I'm going to ask you an off the wall question based on being a runner who's qualified for Boston and done hard things. What's harder, writing a column, acting, or running a marathon?
Oh, marathon, no question. The other stuff is just fun. Don't get me wrong. If you want to do anything well, you need to work hard to do it well. But running is always hard work, whereas the other stuff comes more easily.
What gave you more joy, the clapping at the end of a scene while you were on stage, or getting the email that you qualified for Boston? Any one of the number of times that you qualified.
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, I think the first time qualifying for Boston was probably the pinnacle, but I do have to say that my first time on stage as an actor and getting that kind of immediate feedback, that was very special too. And I'm also a playwright, so I think the pinnacle is if you write words that other people say that audiences like, that's way up there on the gratification meter. So
I can only imagine. So what came first, acting and playwriting and then marathoning? Did they happen simultaneously, or was marathoning first?
Marathoning was first. I really got into acting about 15 years ago, and playwriting maybe 10 years ago. So more recent hobbies.
What marathon training and racing lessons carried over to being on stage and screenwriting?
Well, it's a little different focus. I mean, I think that if you're a good writer and a good actor, well, I guess the thing that you can draw on it is sort of just being in the moment and being true and being realistic. Not trying to act, but just trying to embody the character or bring yourself to a character. But I do like to see things as like a writer and a director. I like to see things from the audience's perspective. So, again, sort of stepping outside of yourself, looking at the bigger picture. What is this going to mean or look like to a broader group of people? So I guess in that sense, there is a parallel. It's not just about you. It's like sort of where does this fit in the bigger picture?
Yeah, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is visualizing a race, visualizing my gear, being at the start line and going through that process of getting through, for me, a 100-mile race to that finish line. And I have to imagine that there's some component of that when you're getting ready to get on stage, that you have to visualize what that scene is going to unfold as.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like opening night to bring out the nerves, but I think similar to racing, you need to trust your training. You need to know that you have said these lines hundreds of times. You're going to remember them. And you should really just sort of focus on being in the moment and having fun with it. Because if it's not fun, what's the point? So
let's play a little game. We have all the money in the world.
Mhm.
You are absolutely up for whatever lead role you want to have. What's the movie we're putting Anthony into?
A movie. Okay. Well, I was thinking stage play, but
Let's go stage play first then, if you've got an answer for that.
I'll say stage play that was based on a movie. My favorite movie is Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and I had the pleasure of directing Spam-A-Lot in my local community theater. And if I could play one of the knights in Spam-A-Lot, that would be my dream role.
I can see you in one of those roles, Anthony. It was definitely, if we had a magic wand, we would wave it. Mm-hmm. We asked this question on What's in Your Earbuds, which is another show that we have on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, and I'm going to flip it to you. Who's playing Anthony as the lead role of a movie about you?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one, because whatever I say is going to sound very, very vain.
No, let it rip.
Yeah. How about Brad Pitt?
There you go. I like it. Absolutely. He's got the chops to play Anthony. I like it. Do you have since you mentioned Brad Pitt, do you have a favorite Brad Pitt movie?
Um, let's see. I'm trying to think no, I was thinking of Robert Redford. Yeah, I guess there was what was his first one with a river runs through it or something?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I would say that's
Yeah.
my favorite then. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but I can
Oh,
watch Moneyball every time it's on. I can watch Moneyball, and it just so happens that Billy Bean, the character that he plays, was a Mets phenom, and I'm a Mets fan from through and through from growing up in New York. So there's
So
a lot of connection.
a quick footnote there, because I also loved Moneyball, and had I thought of that first, I probably would have said that one. But I got to hear Billy Bean speak at a conference in Detroit, and got to answer a question. I said, I know the movie's sort of based loosely in reality. I said, but tell me the truth. When the Boston Red Sox made you that offer, that was, I don't know how much it was, but
A lot.
yeah, I'm like, did you, in the movie, you felt fine turning it down because you got to be near your family. I said, is that for real? He said, absolutely. Would make the same decision today. Never look back. So he's somebody who put family and personal goals. There are things that are more important than money, I guess is the point.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because I had a conversation earlier today with a client of mine about money, and I don't know if you listen to the South Beach Sessions podcast from Lebitard and Friends, but he was talking to a comedian, and the conversation circled back to he was now writing jokes for money, and it became infinitely harder to write those jokes because now, right, paycheck is dependent on it.
Yeah.
And when you mention Billy Bean, and I think about the amount of money that it's not to say that you don't want to win a World Series in Oakland, but the pressure to win a World Series in Oakland is a lot less than winning a World Series in Boston. And the return on that investment for that salary is got to be diminishing returns. And
Yeah.
so being with family, smiling, happy, being around his daughter, and a little bit of a lower pressure scenario, I could understand that decision-making process.
Right. And, I'm sure he still made millions. So how many millions do you need, really? But yeah.
Right. Yeah, he was not hurting for, going out and getting avocado toast these days. Let's put it that way. So you are a baseball fan, and if you could run a marathon in any city where the finish line is inside of that stadium, what would be the marathon and the stadium?
Well, I guess I'd have to go back to Boston. I mean, to finish in Fenway Park, I've only been in Fenway once, but I think finishing a marathon inside Fenway would be very cool.
Yeah, I've been to Fenway one time myself, and it is an absolutely amazing experience. I've been to Camden Yards, which was a really cool experience. Old Yankee Stadium, I've been at growing up in the Bronx. I went to the Childhood Dream. I don't know if you've been out here to LA, but do you remember the show This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So between him and oh my gosh, I just forgot the Dodger broadcaster's name. Vin Scully. Between their two voices and the images of Dodger Stadium growing up as a kid, it was always one of those places I had to absolutely visit. And I went there a couple of years ago, and it was everything I imagined it being. Like, it's just an amazing thing. It's terrible getting in and out of the traffic is terrible, but the stadium in and of itself is unreal. And I think if I had to run a marathon again, I would probably pick, maybe it's recency bias, but I would pick to run and finish in Dodger Stadium with the palm trees and the mountains all within, eye shot.
Well, my first marathon in Detroit in 2002, we actually did finish inside Ford Field, which they don't do anymore just because of the logistics. But that was pretty cool to have my family there cheering for me, as it's the only time I'm ever going to get to run on Ford Field, but to do that at the end of the marathon was pretty cool.
It would be neat if there was some, we have the 6 world majors. If there was some way we could coordinate with 30 Major League Baseball teams to have the 30 finish line somewhere in a baseball stadium, that'd be amazing. Yeah. Anthony, we're coming up on the end of our time together, and we always include what we call rapid fire food questions. Now, I say rapid fire, but take your time, think about the answer. We can chit chat because I love talking about food, especially with endurance sports surrounded by it. So, are you ready to get started on our rapid fire food questions?
I am ready.
Awesome. Oreos. Are you a fan of the original Oreo, the double stuffed Oreo, the new variations, Cakester, or thin
Original.
crisp? Original.
Yep. I'm old school. Original.
Yeah. So how do you eat them? Are you a spin and scrape? Are you eating the whole thing? Are you dunking?
Spin and scrape.
No dunking at all.
Nah, it just waters it down. Need the full experience.
That's right. So I am an aspirin. I call them aspirin popping because I just throw the whole cookie in my mouth. I don't even bother spinning and scraping. I'm just eating the whole thing at once. Licorice, red or black?
Red.
Red Vines or Twizzlers?
Twizzlers.
Nice. Do you bite it off the two ends and then use it as a straw still as a kid, like you were when you were a kid?
No.
Are Peeps a real candy, or are they just an abomination to being sold to us on Easter?
Don't get me started on Peeps or cotton candy. No. No, wrong.
What's the downside to cotton candy? What don't you like about cotton candy?
There's nothing there. It's just like air. I'm not paying to eat air.
So when you go to Comerica Park these days, you're not going to the concession stand and asking for cotton candy?
No, I won't even buy my grandchildren cotton candy. I'm like, no, you can do better.
What would be better if the grandkids were like, "Can we get cotton candy?" You would say, "No, we can do better." What are you offering as better?
Well, almost anything, but hot dogs, popcorn, Dippin' Dots. Dippin' Dots are all right.
Yes. All right. Next question: is candy corn a real candy, or is it just sugar coated in earwax?
I happen to love candy corn, so I'm going to say.
All right. So, when you eat candy corn, are you eating the three different colors, separately, or are you just throwing the whole thing in?
I'm eating them like you eat Oreos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when Halloween, Thanksgiving roll around, are you rubbing your hands together and you're like, I can't wait to get to the grocery store?
No, because I know that if I buy any of that stuff, I'm going to eat way too much of it. So I'll just eat some of the leftovers and be happy with it.
I love it. So at some point in our life, our grandparents had a candy bowl, and they usually had three choices in there: the spiral mint, the strawberry hard candy that had the soft center, and butterscotch. Which one are you taking out of your grandparents' candy dish?
Butterscotch.
Yes, it's so good. I'm with you on that.
Definitely underrated.
Yeah, totally underrated. Peanut butter or nut butter? Are you going creamy or crunchy?
Crunchy.
How do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And I'll give you your options. Do you put peanut butter on one side and jelly on the other and smash them together? Or do you put peanut butter down and then jelly over top and then fold the other slice of bread over top?
I only knew that there was one way, which is peanut butter one side, jelly on the other. And I eat that sandwich almost every day for lunch. I actually mix nut butter. So
yes, my guy. I'm a huge peanut butter and jelly fan. Probably 4 or 5 times a week for me too.
Yep.
Easily. Okay, so how do you eat the sandwich? Do you just take the sandwich and start eating it, or are you cutting it into 2 rectangles, 2 triangles, 4 triangles, or 4 squares?
2 rectangles.
2 rectangles. Yeah. I either go triangle because I want to, or either 2 triangles or 4 triangles, because my mother used to cut it into 4s for me, and it always brings me back to my childhood. Yeah. And then I could always pick it up and be fancy with my pinky in the air, like I'm eating a fancy finger sandwich with the queen. Red velvet cake. Is red velvet a real flavor, or is it just chocolate cake dressed up to go to the prom?
Oh, I like red velvet. Yeah.
I didn't ask if you liked it or not, because I like it too. But is it just a fancy chocolate cake?
Nope, it's real. It's a real thing.
Okay. Favorite flavor of ice cream is?
I'm going to go nostalgic. I'm going to say butter pecan because it was my mom's favorite. But.
Yes, good call. Favorite candy bar?
Snickers.
Chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin cookie?
Chocolate chip all the way.
And then last question for you. So A tray of brownies has been baking. It's on the counter. It's cooling off. Is Anthony going to take the corner edge, an edge, or straight into the middle for the ooey gooey part?
I like the corners. Like
Something to hold on to.
Yeah, like the corners of my pizza and the corners
Yes.
of the brownies. So.
I was about to say, as a Detroit style pizza eater, it's got to be the corner, right?
I like the corner, right.
Anthony, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story with me. I really appreciate it. There's a lot for us to learn. And where can people go if they want to donate money to your fundraising with the Dana-Farber Cancer Research Foundation?
Well, it's the Dana-Farber Marathon Challenge. Let me see if I can actually find a URL.
And we'll be sure to drop this into the show notes when we post it.
Yeah, I think if you go to danafarber.jimmyfund.org, you might be able to get there, but I might be able to send you a more specific link.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we put that into the notes. Anthony, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Jason, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
To those of you in the audience who have watched us live, thank you for joining us. The greatest gift that you can give to anybody is your time, and you have given of your time to me and to Anthony on this Fireside Chat, and I cannot thank you enough. Be sure to check out our other shows on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platforms. And while you are there, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and if you're on Spotify, comment, as that will help us get these stories out to the public in greater force, because these are stories that need to be heard. Have a great night.